The WHO is on track to evolve into a global organization for manipulation, inspired by the article written by U.G. Grants. He said, I demand that the World Health Organization, WHO, be renamed the World Manipulation Organization, WMO. Justification? Now there are too many freedom of expression in the path of World Health Organization towards world domination, so that this cannot be ignored. Too many victims of this. First of all, there are the International Health Regulations of 2005, IHR 2005. Even the draft amendment did not hide the WHO's brutal claim to dominance of opinion in health matters and to unconditional, infallible, and absolute truth, under the disguised title Commitment to Cooperation and Support, Article 44A IHR. 2 new binding duties are to be introduced. Paragraph 1H, the obligation to combat the spread of false and unreliable information about public health events, preventive and anti-epidemic measures and activities in the media, social networks, and other ways of spreading such information. 2. Combating the spread of false and unreliable information about public health events, preventive and anti-epidemic measures and activities in the media, social networks, and other ways of spreading such information. Other media? What does that mean? Other media. It may be people talk to each other or signaling to each other, who knows? Now, it remains puzzling what constitutes false or unreliable information. Does the WHO perhaps mean the statement of the Federal Minister of Health, Professor Karl Lauterbach, that vaccines are effective and safe? Does he mean the statement by the Standing Committee on Immunization, STILCO, that vaccines do not pose any risk to pregnant and nursing mothers and their babies? How should the relationship with the CA Plus Pandemic Treaty, amendments to the Convention, which is binding under international law, and its IHR in relation to the freedom of Article 11 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union look concretely? On Article 10 of the European Convention on Human Rights, will there be later relativizing provisions such as the fundamental right does not apply if the WHO declares a pandemic? While the terms media or social networks still seem half understood, in individual cases, however, there will be legions of lawyers around the world fighting over the interpretation. This means a discussion at a table of patrons, a statement at a demonstration through a poster, a banner, a flag or a banner, a WhatsApp dialogue, or a confidential conversation with friends even. And what is still confidential when the army of reference heroes, quote unquote, are encouraged to play block watcher or Stas 2.0? In other words, people spying on each other. The Monitoring Committee Accord, CA+. But that is why we have the Implementation Committee under Article 53 of IHR, which is made up of all member states, is supposed to monitor the reporting obligations and provide for strict implementation monitoring with the possibility of sanctions, a kind of mini world government, an international censorship authority based directly at the WHO, which is supposed to be better able to combat false facts and disinformation, possibly in conjunction with similar bodies to be created in parallel in signatory states. Brazil sends its regards there. Fake news about vaccines and their effects will soon be punishable by 2 to 8 years in prison. What is wrong or right will be decided in the future by WHO's Mr. Tedros, it seems. The daily reporting hero will only do is pave the way for the media or the judicial scaffold. The CA Plus Pandemic Treaty is even clearer. And there in Article 18, the censorship measures that signatory states must comply with are described in more detail. Admittedly, that the content of CA Plus will be updated by the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, the INB, which consists of all states, including Greece, until the 77th World Health Conference in May 2024, and it's assumed that the adoption of the pandemic agreement will be, as the implementation of the measures contained therein is up to the individual member state which must enforce this decision in accordance with their national legislation, a kind of declaration of submission with a harakiri ceremony. But Germany had already handed over its mandate to lead negotiations in the EU by a decision of the EU Council back in March 2022. So now the supranational EU, not controlled by German sovereignty, speaks as one of its main initiators, CA+, with the common voice of all 27 member states. In describing the pandemic agreement, the Federal Ministry of Health does not say a single line about the pitfalls of this treaty, which later will be binding under international law. The World Health Organization, the highest authority that gives orders, one of them is Article 11 CA+, which describes the central role of the WHO in the framework of the general principles and approaches. And according to it, the WHO is the leading and coordinating authority in all international health matters and also the leader of all multilateral cooperation in the governance of global health. Member states also sign that WHO is fundamental for all pandemic-related improvements in health system prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery, given that at least suboptimal, to put it politely, to actually abysmal performance in pandemic control over the last 2 decades, this is a rather brazen self-description. Do our ministers of parliament really know what fundamental democratic decisions they recklessly handed over in 2022 when they mandated the European Union to carry out further negotiations with the WHO on the IHR? Do they really know their content, which amounts to a declaration of state submission to a non-governmental, non-democratic, and corrupt organization? Do they know about their consequences from 2024 onwards? Is the principle of leadership, quote-unquote, in recent times again pronounceable as democratic consensus? Pandemic treaty calls for fight against infodemics. A second pitfall is also Article 18 CA+, Communications and Public Awareness CA+, which obliges signatory states to combat infodemics, hence to take action against false and misleading information or disinformation, and through international cooperation. And after receiving this commitment under international law, each member state must establish its own censorship network and demonstrate that it has legal arrangements for this purpose. Is to develop an information management and an engagement that will be as broad-based as possible. A plan of almost Orwellian dimensions, a la Ministry of Truth, with state-directed danger information with social educational measures to be developed specifically for this purpose, with controlled public awareness and information programs, with regular consultations and with civil society organizations, Federal Department of Health, Rockefeller Foundation, Gates Foundation, and others, and with the media, including periodical reviews and social extensive listening processes. And all this notably in order to identify the threatening disinformation profiles, which will then be countered with yet to be developed public information and communication strategies. You're filled with absolute horror when you imagine this package in its final form. All journalists should immediately go to the barricades if they do not want to end up as mercenaries. Abuse of family private wealth? Can you imagine that? Abuse of families' private wealth. As if we haven't endured enough of this in the last 3 years and pay for with the hundreds of millions of euros from taxpayers' money. The uncertified gold standard PCR test, the daily infection numbers, the cases, the R factor, the risk of infection without a mask, the count of infected patients and deaths, the hospitalization numbers, the bed occupancy drama, the efficacy and safety of our mRNA vaccines, and others. Full-page government propaganda in print media with countless detailed data that are not true, the television online advertisement for warning apps. Those who believe even today that they can guarantee, deepen, or strengthen public trust and commitment to public health and social policy by such means, by hiding facts, by preventing publication or finally by deletions in publications, later ordered by courts under the Freedom of Information Act, have lost ground. In the past, waste of family property, quote unquote, was a criminal offense in the Penal Code. The corresponding paragraph 170 has been repealed. Today, a similar criminal offense should be created for the waste of state property. Research funds thrown in the trash. In the future, member states should carry out relevant research at their own expense so that politicians can always be informed about what exactly in a pandemic could impede compliance with the health and social policy measures mandated by the WHO, mainly the willingness to vaccinate and use of appropriate therapeutic and mainly non-therapeutic interventions, and what could promote trust in the institution of science and government. The more than vague terminology of obstruction, the means ordered by the WHO, does not inspire much confidence and should in itself be the subject of a contradiction for the signing of such a treaty. My advice instead, he says, invest in developing better policies that are truly based on science and evidence and not distorted. Then trust in politicians will return. This does not require extensive research. Money can be better invested in health policy, for example, in care. Greater use in behavioral sciences. Inevitably, the near-secret 2000 October 22 catastrophic contagion by WHO staff in Brussels, which is said to have been mainly about vaccinated children and teenagers, comes to mind. The Vice President of Germany's Robert Koch Institute, RKI, had been invited as a personal expert at the expense of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, so the Federal Ministry of Health had no knowledge of the simulation and therefore could not provide information for details and conclusions. Social networks are at risk. Overall, WHO makes it clear in what spirit it intends to interpret the CA and IHR legal instruments in the future. At the heart of this decision is the training and payment of positive social media influencers with wide reach, distinguished journalists and social activists with large local reach to counter misinformation. So recruitment of informal workers, imae, a la German Democratic Republic, a new job exchange for heroes of reporting, a la Federal Republic of Germany. More government money for MyThinkX. It was the, in this respect, unsuspecting Süddeutsche Zeitung that already in October 17, 2010 stated that there are profitable working groups within a critical distance in various branches of journalism. He aptly titled the article, Sticky Proximity. Your Twitter account will be automatically verified. According to the World Health Assembly resolution, a dedicated Twitter account will also be created to automatically monitor health misinformation and send automated counter messages to recipients of such misinformation with the aim of encouraging users not to follow the source. AI and algorithms, supported by the WHO and the state, opinion manipulation and source selection, the worst one could imagine, except Orwell. Consequently, the entire resolution does not even pay lip service to the respect for the free formation and expression of human will. Freedom of science shows once again how urgent and important all this is supposed to be, is to oppose and tightening of the IHR and CA and the WHO claim and acquire the authority articulated in them. Deviant theories, even if scientifically correct, will henceforth be labeled as disinformation and combated. The almost delusional singular truth claim of WHO has been shown to have arrogant, almost absolutist characteristics. And this I've translated for you from a Greek article, Eyes Wide Open. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.